Hello, today's topic lecture is the Doctrine of Progress. This is a fundamental idea that is at the foundation of Western civilization, indeed of global civilization today. But it was not always the case that this idea of the Doctrine of Progress existed. So let me talk a little bit about this Doctrine of Progress, its origins, and some of the implications of this notion. Okay, at the most basic level, the Doctrine of Progress is the idea that we as human beings in the world that we live in are situated between the past and the future. And that history is arranged in a kind of straight line that proceeds from point A in the past through point B in the present and into point B in the future. The past, according to the Doctrine of Progress, sucks, however you want to measure it. It's a horrible place to be. The present is a better place to be, however you want to measure it, in terms of material standards of living, levels of education, elimination of superstition, whatever it is. The future is a better place even than the present. And so people believe, according to the Doctrine of Progress, that history is a kind of marching from a world that sucks through a world that's better to a world that's going to be even better. And we are brought up on that notion sort of like mother's milk. It's instilled within us at the most basic levels in our systems of education, in the way that journalists write about things in the newspapers, and the assumptions that politicians make, and so on and so forth. Now, this Doctrine of Progress, from an historian's point of view, is a relatively new phenomenon. People did not always believe in the Doctrine of Progress. Before the age of science and technology, medieval Europe, for example, people believed that life sucked, and there was nothing that you could do about it. That's why the focus was so much on the afterworld, because the promise of this world was pretty pathetic. And so the most you could hope for was if you went to church, if you confessed your sins and all the rest of it, that you might end up in heaven. But this world really didn't hold much promise for you, and that made sense. I mean, people didn't really have much control over disease like we do today. People die by the time, mostly, that they're in their 30s or 40s. If you survived into adulthood, you probably didn't have parents who would be around to converse with you. Children died at an alarmingly fast rate. The instances of child mortality were quite high. And of course, people weren't able to manipulate their physical environment, enjoy higher standards of living, acquire more material things, have a bigger house. All these are ideas associated with modernity, and in particular with this confidence that science and technology will allow us to control the world, to manipulate it, and produce a better world. And that gave birth to this idea that I've been talking about, the Doctrine of Progress. It emerged with the roots of the scientific and technological revolution in the 1500s and 1600s. It was inspired in particular by the application of scientific knowledge in the Industrial Revolution through the 1800s and 1900s and into the 20th century, and now the 21st century. And it became part of our assumption about how the world is supposed to work. So that's the Doctrine of Progress. A couple of the implications of this idea of the Doctrine of Progress. If you believe that things are going to get better and they don't, then the proverbial stuff hits the fan. See, if you don't think things are going to get better, the fact that they're not getting better is not a problem, politically, socially, culturally, whatever. If you think things should get better when they don't, that becomes a problem. And so the whole world is reoriented around making sure things get better if they don't get better. And here's where the subject matter of our course comes into play once again. Science and technology riding on that white horse, coming to the rescue to solve the problem so that we can get history back on track toward a better future. And this is, by the way, something that also makes science and technology politicized. That in the political realm, we increasingly look to science and technology to get us back on track toward progress, to solve problems of various sorts or another. Okay, one last point I want to make is with regard to how this Doctrine of Progress changes our conception of how time works. And I know this is a little bit abstract, but just bear with me for a second. Most civilizations prior to the modern era believed that history was cyclical. It operated like a circle. Where you end up is where you start. Point A at the bottom of the circle, and you go around it. Maybe you have the rise of a civilization, but then you have the decline and fall of the civilization back to your starting point. There is, in other words, no permanent progress forward. Cyclical views of history operated in ancient Greece. They operated in China and in many other contexts as well. Now, what's unique with this doctrine of progress is that it explicitly rejects the cyclical view. It says that, no, history isn't a circle. You don't end up where you start. You start in the past, and where you are in the future is fundamentally different from the past. And, here's the punchline, there ain't no going back. There's no going back to the past. The past is done forever. We have fundamentally transformed the world and moved to a different place. And again, that's in line with this doctrine of progress, moving on a timeline forward into history. Now, one example of how this transformation occurs is the very word revolution. Revolution. It's from the root to revolve. It's cyclical. But the modern conception of revolution, scientific, technological, political, isn't of a circle. It's of going from one state to another and never being able to go back. One example of this is King Louis XVI, the French Revolution. He gets his head chopped off. You can't put that head back on. There ain't no going back to the past. The future we have created is fundamentally different, and we can never go back. Now, one aspect of, and I'll just finish with this, one byproduct of this doctrine of progress and the realization that we can never go back to the way it used to be is that some people say, good riddance. Who the hell would want to go back to that horrible world that we came from? You know, we have a much higher standard of living. We're not superstitious. Life's getting better. We have more toys. I have an iPhone. Why would I want to go back to a flip phone world? It makes no sense. But there are other people who think, you know what? In moving into the future, maybe we've lost something fundamental that we need to go back to. But the problem is we can't. And so you might say that in reaction to the doctrine of progress, you have two types of people. Glass half full, glass half empty. Glass half full people say, good riddance, I'm glad we don't have to go back. Glass half empty people say, oh my God, look what we lost. I wish I could go back, but the problem is you can't. And that's related to another feeling of the modern world that we live in called nostalgia. Nostalgia is a condition that only modern people can experience. It only comes from the idea that we can't go back. That's what produces nostalgia. And by the way, in the modern world, nostalgia sells. Antiques Roadshow, if any of you watch that, old things become valuable precisely because they embody a world that people perceive we can never go back to. And therefore, the monetary value of things associated with oldness begins to grow. The more we have a sense of moving into a future and not going back, the more nostalgic, you might say, we become for the past that we have left behind. And again, how does this relate to the topic matter of the course? Science and technology is what leads us to this world that we can never go back from.